Joining me now, MSNBC political analyst, former Ohio Governor John Kasich, New York Times opinion columnist David French, and Washington Post chief correspondent Dan Balz. So, Governor Kasich, you told the New York Times that President Biden's debate prep has been, quote, too insular. As someone who has debated Donald Trump, how should the Biden campaign be approaching Thursday's debate, and what should the Trump campaign be doing?
Well, I think, first of all, it's an opportunity for Biden to change the narrative that he's too old, that, he can't even walk off the stage. It's a chance for him to stand up and show that he really does know what he's doing, if he, in fact, can show that, I think, number one. Number two, he needs to debunk this myth that everything was great under Trump economically. And I think, thirdly, he needs to talk about the foreign policy situation that's going on. And probably also touch on his latest plans to deal with immigration. So it's very, very important for Donald Trump. Is basically to not interrupt, to not, to get into these antics that will turn people off. And in some respects, as somebody said, this may be the most important debate since the 1980 debate with Reagan and Jimmy Carter. Reagan having to prove that he really knew what he was doing, particularly on foreign policy. This is important for Biden to be able to show that he's in command.
And Dan, you sort of counterintuitively, you're writing that given the lack of any real movement in the polls so far this year, it's questionable whether Thursday's debate would provide a significant jolt to the electorate that fundamentally changes them, absent a major mistake. Well, there's always that caveat, absent a major mistake. We've seen that, of course, with, Poland not being under the domination of the Soviet Empire, back with Gerald Ford. We've seen the way Ronald Reagan preempted the age issue, which had been a real concern in 1984 against Walter Mondale, by saying he wasn't going to take advantage of the youth and inexperience of his opponent. There could be a blunder. We certainly saw that. Maybe not at the time, but what Donald Trump said about the Proud Boys last time around, in 2016.
Well, Andrea, I think it's very difficult to overhype this debate. As Governor Kasich said, this is the most important debate. It may be even more important than that 1980 debate. So that's the first thing I think that everybody agrees on. I think the second is that if anything is going to change the trajectory of this race, it could be this debate. We've gone through a lot of big events over the last year, and nothing has really, moved the polls in any significant way. We're in basically a margin of error race. And the third thing I would say is that I think that each of these candidates has more to lose than to gain, because people are going to be judging them from a kind of a negative perspective. And if they play into that, that stereotype or caricature or however you want to define it, it could be quite damaging. But I think that, people are going to be watching this debate to judge these two candidates, first of all, on their kind of temperament and readiness, and then there will be the issue debate. But those are separate, and people will judge both of those as they see it.
And David French, Donald Trump told NBC News that in his mind, well, it was a whole gaggle of reporters there in Philly, that he knows whom he's going to pick for his vice presidential choice. NBC News has reported that there are three top candidates, Doug Burgum, Senator J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio. Among those, who do you think would be the most effective vice presidential running mate for Donald Trump?
I think the most effective running mate for Trump, the one who would help him win, would be J.D. Vance more than any of the others. This is a guy who's a true believer, has become, well, even if he is or isn't as irrelevant, he's become a very eloquent defender of MAGA, perhaps the most eloquent defender of MAGA. Rubio has already proven that he doesn't necessarily flourish on the national stage, and that's an understatement. And Burgum, I think, is just really a non-entity. There's nothing about him that is going to challenge the absolute dominance of Trump in sort of his charisma and his presence. Whereas both J.D. Vance and Rubio do have some real gifts in communication that Burgum does not have. But I think better for Trump and MAGA is J.D. Vance. I think of Burgum as kind of a non-entity. And Rubio, he's in the middle. He's in the middle. I don't think he breached as J.D. Vance, but he is more of a presence than Burgum.
And what about Dan Balls? What about the double haters that Ashley Parker wrote about today in terms of voters opposed to both candidates? How do you think that the candidates can try to appeal to those and change their minds?
Well, that's a very important question, because I think those double haters, as we are calling them this year, are in general so dissatisfied with both candidates that the question is how many of them will actually vote. And so I think that each of these candidates has to say something directly to them to convince them that they understand, that each of these candidates understands their lives, understands where they're coming from, and understands why they're disillusioned both with the candidates and with the political process. And I think it will be a challenge for each of these candidates, President Biden and former President Trump, to be able to speak that effectively to these voters. I think these voters are going to wait well into the fall before they make a decision.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.